I'm Linda, alcoholic addict. And this is the first time that I've shared my story since I moved to North Carolina. I'm from New England, Massachusetts originally, and I guess I'll begin at the beginning. I grew up in a small town in western Massachusetts, and right off the bat, things weren't going good for me. And I think that by the time I was 5 or 6 or 7 years old, I discovered sugar, and I used that to comfort myself until I got older. And when I got to high school, I had a lot of trouble in high school, a lot of behavior problems, a lot of turmoil at home. My parents weren't alcoholic, and I just came out of the womb like a tornado. It was a perfect storm. And I got kicked out of high school, and I ended up going to boarding school, and that's where I had my first drink, which was a bottle of Tango. For some of you old enough to remember what that is, it's pretty disgusting. But anyways, I drank the whole bottle in my dorm room and got really, really sick and thought it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I also had gotten diet pills from a doctor that my mother took me to that would be called Black Beauties back in the day. And I learned that you could get high off of them too, so I had a good time with that. And then I got kicked out of boarding school and ended up back in high school. And after 5 years of high school, I dropped out because I still wasn't going to graduate. And the most popular guy in the whole high school moved across the street from me, and he had 3 sisters, and it was love at first sight. Their mother was an alcoholic, and she would be passed out on the floor, and I would leave my house to go to school and go right in the front door of their house, step over their mother, and spend the day in their house drinking. And then when we would run out of when we'd run out of beer, because that's what I drank, we would hitchhike up to McDonald's, which was actually a pretty new restaurant at that time, Panhandle, and back then you could buy a 6-pack of beer for $1. So that's where I learned how to drink, and I thought that that was the greatest thing on earth. I had no plans to go to college. My plan was to party, and I grew up in the 70s, so it was perfect. The timing was great. I went to the anti-war demonstrations, and it really wasn't about anything political. It was just about getting stoned. And eventually, my neighbor's mother fell down the stairs and almost died and ended up in rehab. And everything changed after that. She started going to AA meetings, and we would go to the AA meetings, and I'll never forget the funny stories and the donuts and the coffee, and we thought it was entertaining, and it never dawned on me that I might end up at a meeting. And fast forward to I'm 24 years old now, and my younger sister, who was a year younger than me, and my best friend, got diagnosed with leukemia. And I didn't know how to handle that. So the drinking and the drugging ratcheted up. And I remember her husband was in the military, so she was at the Walter Reed Army Medical Hospital. And I had come down to help to take care of her. And she had a doctor's appointment. And I coached her the whole way to the doctor's that I wanted her to ask the doctor for Dilaudid, and that was my main concern. I was not interested in my sister getting relief from her pain. I was interested in getting her pain medication. And so she said to me, just as she got up, as they called her name, and she got up to go in, she said, "I'm not doing it." And lo and behold, she comes out, and what do they give her but 100 Dilaudids? And myself and her husband used up all her medication, and she had to go to the doctors and tell. And I didn't even have the slightest bit of remorse about that. That was the weekend I learned how to get myself off, because I had been using heroin, and I always had to have somebody else stick a needle in my arm. And this is a girl that grew up in a upper middle class suburb of Springfield, Massachusetts, where there was very little diversity, and that kind of stuff just did not happen. I didn't grow up thinking that I was going to live that kind of life. And after my sister died, my drinking and drugging ratcheted up even another notch, and now I was engaged in a lot of illegal activity in order to support my drug and alcohol habit, and I ended up getting arrested on a fairly regular basis. And my parents were so distraught about losing their daughter that it wasn't that noticeable, and I stayed away as much as I possibly could. And eventually I was mandated to a drug treatment program in Boston, Massachusetts, where was the first time I had been to meetings, but not really for me. I would go to a detox so I could have a vacation from my life on the street. And when I got kicked out of that program, I told my probation officer, because they suggested I go back to another inpatient drug program, and I told my probation officer, who was only just supervising my probation, she wasn't my original probation officer, but I told her that I'd rather go to jail than to go back inpatient. And guess that's exactly what happened. And I was so mad and so shocked over that they were actually going to take my words literally, and I had the biggest resentment. And I came out of jail. I got a year in Framingham prison, and I didn't serve the whole year, but I came out of there, and you would think that I would. My new goal in life was to get on a methadone maintenance program, and so I started. So I would go. You could get on a methadone detox program, but to reach nirvana, it took a couple of years of waiting on a waiting list to actually get to be on methadone for the rest of your life, and that's what I would have settled for. But you had to give a urine that only had methadone in it, and you had to go to counseling. And so every week I'd go to counseling, and it was always the same story. I want to lose weight. That was my biggest concern. So I committed that I'd go to an OA meeting. And eventually I got too ashamed to go back and say that I hadn't done that, and I showed up at an OA meeting. Well, in OA, it's all the same steps, and it's all the same traditions, and people in OA that are abstinent from food are also abstinent from drugs and alcohol. And there are a lot of alcoholics, and so of course I got a sponsor that was in AA and OA, but I didn't tell anybody that I was on methadone, because I thought that they wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. So I was keeping this secret that was eating me up alive. And I remember I went to go pay my rent, and my landlord had a pile of cocaine on the kitchen table, and I decided I was going to have some, because I thought that if I had some cocaine, it would curb my appetite. And I went back to the ATM about 6 or 7 times because I had money, because I'd been on methadone for about a year and I hadn't been doing anything but my methadone and drinking. And for a drug addict and an alcoholic, that was a pretty good deal. I used to sell my urine because it only had methadone in it. And it was highly sought after. So I crawled up to my apartment probably around 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was so full of fear because I knew what was in store for me. I had already lost everything. I didn't have a relationship with my family. I was living alone. I couldn't hang on to a roommate. I couldn't hold down a job. And the methadone was the only reason I wasn't in jail. And I just got on my knees and I said, either heal me or take me. And I got up the following morning and I called my sponsor and I told her the truth. I told her I was on methadone, that I'd been on methadone, and she said, don't go back to the clinic. And I actually, about 5 years after I got off that methadone clinic, I went back to get my date so I could celebrate my anniversary. I went to meetings every day for about 2 years. And I only went to meetings that my sponsor said that I could go to. And I only called people that were on the list of people that she said that I could talk to. And I'm really grateful that I was so desperate that I was willing to do that, because I would have gotten into a relationship and I would have been out the door. And I remember when I woke up the next morning, the obsession to drink and drug had been lifted. And I felt like God was, at the time I didn't call it God, something was doing for me what I could never do for myself. I never thought that I would get sober. I didn't even have a desire to get sober. I wanted to be on methadone maintenance for the rest of my life. I thought that I would always need something, that I could not do life just raw, just all. And so for the first couple of years, I went to lots and lots and lots of meetings. And I also was on the search for the replacement of alcohol. If it was food, if it was compulsively shopping, if it was compulsively exercising. My motto was, if a little bit's good, then a lot is better. And so everything I did to excess. And I tried for years to do this program the easier, softer way. And I'm here today to tell you that the easier, softer way is to do the program the way that the big book says to do the program. But this alcoholic would spend 10 hours trying to get out of 1 hour worth of work. And it's been a tremendous, tremendous journey for me. It's taken me, after I got sober, I went to school and I got a career working with animals, which is something that I wanted to do when I was a kid, but that would have never happened because I could not hold down a job when I was drinking and drugging. And I went to school, I got a career, I started hanging around with people that were sober or hanging around with people that weren't alcoholics. But part of my story is that I had a really bad eating disorder, and for the first 10 years, I've been sober 30 years, and for the first 10 years, I was very much in my eating disorder, and I believe that the promises don't come true for me if I'm addicted to something else, even though I'm not drinking and I'm not drugging. And thank God those first 10 years that's the only thing that kept me alive, was that I was sober. And I eventually went into the hospital, and I was in a terrible, very, very, very toxic relationship. And I remember the last night that I was in the hospital, the same experience happened. I was laying in my bed and I prayed, either heal me or take me, because I can't keep living the way that I'm living. And I had the exact same experience. And it's funny because I always used to describe myself as somebody that wouldn't let go of anything. I didn't let go of anything that I didn't leave claw marks in. And every time I gave my problem to God, I was caught by God, and I had an enormous, enormous relief from that. So God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And as my journey progressed, I had a lot of things happen to me. I had a stillborn daughter, and I stayed sober over that. And I had a healthy baby after that, and I raised him in meetings. I took him to AA meetings until he has ADHD. I took him there until he was too out of control to be in meetings. And actually, part of that journey was that he has ADHD. He was in the first grade. He was already getting kicked out of school in the first grade. It was like, and I bought this book. He was being diagnosed. I bought this book called Driven to Distraction, and it was all about my story. I cried like halfway through the book. It explained, back then we were called underachievers. And I remember I had a fifth grade teacher who used to grab my hair and bang my head up and down on the desk and tell me that my mother gave her permission, which I bet she did. I'm so grateful that because of this fellowship, I did never do that to my son. I did not pass this legacy on. My father is 87 years old. He didn't start drinking till he was 65 years old. And he's been drinking now for 22 years. And it damn nearly killed him last year. But I'm powerless over that too, but it sort of explains where I came from because I was the only alcoholic in my family. And I do believe that the nut doesn't fall far from the tree. I know it's not my responsibility if my son becomes an alcoholic, that he has a higher power in his life. There was a period of time for me in recovery that I thought it was my job to save everybody that came into my life, and I had the same experience with that. When I was in so much pain, I got on my knees and I asked God, please take this from me. I'm powerless over this, and I was able to let that go. I would obsess about what my part could have been in the outcome of another alcoholic's life. And it was very painful for me. I buried a lot of people in this program on my journey, and I miss a lot of them even today. But I can't save anybody. All I can be is the best copy of the big book that anybody will ever see. My job is to live the life that my higher power wants me to live. And I don't always do that perfectly. The whole willingness thing was a foreign concept to me, be willing to do God's will. I would get on my knees in the morning and say, thy will be done. And as I'm saying it, I know I'm going to take my will back because I've got other plans. And somewhere along the line, life got too painful for me when I didn't get my way. And I would get into the negative thing. Oh, nothing good ever happens for me. And it just got too painful for me to live like that. And I had heard lots and lots and lots of times that God is in charge of the master plan. Well, today I believe that God has a plan for me, and I'm not in charge of the plan. The plan's always better than my plan. But the pain and the suffering part is optional. And I heard that too, and I didn't understand what it meant. So I'm not going to say that every time I don't get my way, I'm clapping and jumping up and down. But the first thought is disappointment. The second thought is, oh yeah, I bet God has something else in store for me. I am not wired, this alcoholic's not wired like regular people. I don't even know how regular people are wired. But for me, this disease is about negativity. This disease, I remember seeing that movie about the guy that had schizophrenia, A Beautiful Mind. And I could identify when he would see the things that weren't real, and he would say to himself, this isn't real, this isn't real. This is the way I have to treat my mind, because the first thing that comes into my mind is usually, my first reaction to something that happens to me is usually not right. Like around the fall when the apple cider comes out, my first reaction to that is, let it hang out for a while till it hardens up, and then I'll have some. I'm not responsible for those things, but I am responsible for the second thought that comes into my head, because I don't romance having a drink or having a drug or engaging in behavior that's not healthy for me. And I had to learn that in this fellowship. I thought that if it came into my head, I had to act on it. And since the not good stuff comes into my head on a regular basis, I had to practice that. I also have a disease that tells me I don't have a disease. If I don't go to meetings for any length of time, my disease says, you don't need to go anymore. That's the most ridiculous thing of all, because I become not a very fun person to be around when I'm not connected to this fellowship. And people ask me, why do you still go to meetings if you've been sober that amount of time? Do you think you're going to drink? I don't think I'm going to drink right away, but I might get so miserable that eventually that I would drink. But why wouldn't I come when I feel so much better when I do? And oftentimes I hear people saying that they work this program without a sponsor. I couldn't work this program without a sponsor, nor would I want to work this program without a sponsor. I've had a lot of sponsors over the years, and I have had a lot of sponsees, and both are a tremendous gift. I have 2 sponsors actually right now, and I call one of them every day. And for me, somebody who gives me 15 minutes of their time every day that I can tell anything to and that I respect and I can run anything by, where are you going to find something like that? Even a therapist isn't going to take a call from you every day and for free. And over the years, I've heard people say, and my stepson was one of them, I just don't get anything out of meetings. And I don't get that. I look at meetings like when you're just coming around, when you're new and you're just coming around, to me it's like you're in the ocean and you're drowning and somebody throws you a life preserver and you go, I don't want it, it's not the right color. I just don't get that because I get so much relief from being part of this fellowship. I can't think of a better way to share a meal with a bunch of people in the fellowship. It makes me so happy. I remember, what I learned along my journey was that I wasted so many years trying to feel the way that I feel now, just living my life. I can go outside and I can smell the flowers and I can look at my horses in the pasture and I can enjoy my dogs. And I can watch my son grow up and I don't need to go put some chemical in my body to make me feel good. That is such a gift. And I've got to be part of other people's journeys. A couple of weeks ago, I watched my son, who has ADHD as I do, I watched him graduate from NC State, magna cum laude, and he's leaving in August to go to Cal Berkeley to get a master's in engineering. And that is such a gift for me, and that's part of this program. Because I didn't say the things to him that were said to me because I knew better. I know that my parents didn't know any better when I was growing up, and I had to spend a lot of time healing over growing up. And I can remember I was on a trail ride with a friend of mine that's Native American and Jewish, and she said to me, Native Americans believe that you choose your parents before you're born. And I thought, I have no responsibility whatsoever for the parents that I got. I was so angry about the thought of that. And she said to me that she was grateful that her mother loved her so inadequately that she found another way. And I could get that. And then I began to realize that early on in my recovery, I always picked older women to be my sponsor. I wasn't going to go to the hardware store looking for a loaf of bread anymore. And I learned that in this fellowship. The women, especially the older women when I was new, loved me until I thought that I was worth loving myself. Because when I came in here, I thought I was worthless. And the stuff that I did when I was out there is so foreign to the way that I live my life today. The chances that I took and how little respect I had for my body and for my life. I'm not the same person. They say if you don't change the person that you brought in here, that you're not going to stay here. And I have been in the process of changing for a really long time. And everything I know about having a better life I learned here. You get like a recipe for a good life if you listen and if you take directions. It doesn't have to take, somebody 1 year sober can get the promises. I stayed because of the promises, and it took me a while to realize that the promises only happen if you read the second part of the promises, so long as you keep in fit spiritual condition. Well, my spiritual condition over the years has changed a lot, the way that I stay in fit spiritual condition. And I'm not always in fit spiritual condition, but a way that I have an idea about that is If I'm driving around and I'm lusting after somebody else's stuff, I know I'm not in fit spiritual condition. I pray that I want what I have and not that I have to have what I want. And if I focus on what I don't have, then I'm not going to be happy. So, and I can't do that unless I'm part of this fellowship. I hear stuff at meetings that I've heard over and over and over again, and all of a sudden they light up. They make sense to me. And it might happen. I remember I was riding in my car, and I learned in this fellowship, you pick up the phone, you don't pick up the drink. And so when stuff was tough for me, I'd pick up the phone, and I'd pick up the phone, and I'd pick up the phone, and I'd pick up the phone. And after a while, I realized that I needed to let go, that I was stirring things up more than I was letting them go. And I remember I was on my way to a meeting, and I was upset about something, and I was trying to reach somebody, and nobody answered the phone. Everybody I called, nobody answered the phone, and I was starting to get upset about how dare they not be there for me, and poor me, and I realized, maybe this is my opportunity to just trust in a higher power, that this is my time to really put my faith and let God handle it for me and give it away to God. And once I had that realization, I'd heard that over and over and over again. Give it to God, let it go. Once I did that, once I realized that and I did that and I let that idea really sink in, every time that I come across a situation that I'm in turmoil and I want to pick up the phone and call somebody and I can't reach somebody, I realize this is my time. This is my time for my higher power in me, and I'm grateful for that. And it just changed the way that I looked at that and turned it from something negative to something positive. And that's what I've learned in this fellowship. I'm programmed to be negative, and I have nothing to do with that. I'm wired that way. And if I don't come here, I'm going to go right back to looking at the negative stuff in my life. And when I come here and I listen to you people share, and I listen to the way that you're living your life, because that's what I come here for. I want to hear how you guys are happy, not drinking and not drugging. I did not come here to be miserable. I came here because of the promises. I believe that we're supposed to be happy. And because of that, my job is to take care of myself. I also used to believe anyways, that it was my God-given right to be comfortable, that I should be comfortable at all times, under any circumstances, and I would go to any lengths for that to happen, and hence the drugs and alcohol and all the other stuff that came along. And you know what? Life does not always give you what you want. You're just not going to be comfortable, and it's what you do with the stuff that comes my way. And there have been periods of time that things haven't gone the way that I wanted them to go. And that's really when I had to test my faith. Do I really believe that God has a plan for me? Or am I only going to believe that when things are going my way? And so I have no choice. I have to believe that God has a plan for me because I want to be happy. And I get all of that from showing up at these meetings, putting $1 in the basket, because they say you can't keep it if you don't give it away. So thank you all for listening.